Hey, it's Matt here. So thanks again so much for the question. Yeah, this is slightly tricky to get too deeply into because again, some of this, what we're after here with this workflow is really, again, just kind of an extension of what we covered in the first video. And so there's not a whole lot I can sort of add to that, but just as a brief demonstration of maybe what a multi-part form would look like, I'll just really quickly build one. So we'll just say this is step 1, and we're just going to get a text field and submit, and then a submission page. Then we'll have a second form. This will be step 2. This will be for the manager. And then again, a simple text field, a submit button, and a submission page. And then finally, well, I guess I'll just kind of do it this way for right now. So we'll just have a 2-step item. So first thing, of course, I would do is I would select each one of the pages in my job, and I select page not required for my form pages. Because again, we want to make sure we can access these in any way. And again, the chain that we'd be creating here is we would have some sort of database table that we'd be writing to, and I'll actually create one right now that'll be called, let's just call this steps, or actually I'll say step 1, and actually no, I just call it steps, it's fine. And so we'll just say name, so this will be the initial field, and then I'm going to add the table in SQL Plus insert item, and so this is going to write into that steps table, so I should be able to refresh this. So there's steps, so ID and name. So I should be able to say Matt and submit, and that goes to this. So that would be like the first idea. And of course, we talked before about the signatures, and that's an added complexity I don't want to get too bogged into right now because it's more just takes the time to do it. But the idea would be then that what if we wanted to then add on to this? So probably what I would do is I would just add new fields, something like this, and I'd save this, and so now we have a new field called manager. And then I would just literally take this code right here, and on this submission page I'd add an SQL Plus item and I'd paste it in, but now I would say manager, and the variable that I'd get would be, let's say, the field called manager. And so what I'm doing then is I'm saying that when you insert this record, I'm going to insert it in with the manager field. Now the tricky part here, of course, is that when I do this, let's say the manager is Steve, I've now created another row. And of course, that's not what I want to do. I actually want to update that current row. So that's why we need to say at some point, depending on how we actually got to this page, we'd have to have some type of hidden field, for example, that would tell us what the user ID is. So we'd have a field called like user ID, and I'm just going to give it a default value of 1 because in the database that ID is 1. So of course we would generate this dynamically, and that's what I showed in that first video. But yes, we would have this, and so now the idea is when I perform this insert, I actually want to perform an update. So I'm going to update steps, manager, values. So I just kind of change this SQL set, whoops, manager equals some value where ID equals some value as well. And again, we kind of talked about, or we kind of looked at this before, but yeah, the idea here is I'm using my dynamic variable picker to just pluck out these values that I care about. So now when I go in here, I should be able to put Steve in again. Oops, and actually got an error. So you know what, actually it's good that I got an error. I see what the error is now, but let me turn on error messages and we'll just kind of take a look at what that error was. So sometimes if it doesn't work, you can just turn on SQL debug mode and say error messages. And you can see here that there's incorrect syntax. So that's because I've got this right here. And I think it's because of that. So I still want to say update steps that manager equals blank where this equals that. So that should be good. And so yeah, so now this should work. Oh, I still actually have a update steps set manager equals blank where ID equals, well, that's actually not what I expected. Let me see that error message again. Where ID equals, oh, because I didn't spell where right. Sorry, it's been a very long coding day for me. Now it should work. Okay, so now we're doing that. So now we're updating one row right here. And I actually want to show here that RackForms can do some of that for us. So if I go into my SQL Plus Automator here, I can go in and I can select my, because I have 2 submission pages, so I can select my second submission page, and I can actually add an update item. And so what I would do is I would say this field, which is called user ID, I would change it so it's ID, and I'm doing that because I want to match the database column. And I actually can say then that this is my where parameter. And so I can say add an SQL plus update item. And now it's actually written that code for me. So update job title set manager equals blank where ID equals blank. And notice it's grabbed those two fields. Obviously this is stages, right? Is that what it's called? No, steps. So RackForms will write that code for us too. It's not a problem. But I just kind of like to do it the manual way just to kind of show you what's going on. But now we're kind of doing it this way. So then again, adding on to this now would just be simply a process of just essentially duplicating these two pages right here and just adding additional fields onto your table. Again, covered a lot of this in the first video. I know obviously there's a lot going on there, but hopefully this is like a nice reset for it. And so yeah, just please let me know what you think of this, and we can circle back if needed. But hopefully this kind of gives you the confidence that you're not too far off. You just need to continue to add fields to your form. And then finally, we had this image that you kindly sent over, so thank you much for that. We have this table that we want to build. So this one is this is a little bit interesting. So this would be a pretty advanced task in terms of not because it's really hard to build, but because this is not what RackForms is meant to build, is kind of stuff like this. We can absolutely build stuff like this, but this is a very advanced use of our builder page feature. And by that I mean within builder here, we can absolutely build a form that uses a template that would sort of show this. But it looks like we're doing some tallying right here and a couple other tasks. So maybe let's leave this aside for right now. Just know that you can do this, but this might actually be more appropriately like a consulting job where you'd actually kind of hire me on, and I'd either take us through this together, or you just hire me on to do this job for you. Because yes, RackForms can do this, but again, doing sums and tallies like this is a little bit more. That said, I certainly don't want to leave you hanging, so just as a quick preview of what this might look like, basically in RackForms we have the SQL query builder, excuse me, the repeater. Sorry, again, very long day. So we have the repeater item, and I can build a query, for example, to grab all those steps that I had before. And I just want to select all rows from that, and I want to build a multi-update form. So I don't know if you've seen this before, but we can very quickly build a form that does stuff like this, right? That updates a database. The trick is, notice it updated here. The trick is when you have something custom like this, what we're probably going to be doing is custom templating. So let's say, for example, that I have this number of hours in a week. Obviously, we'd have to get that from SQL somewhere. And so our simple queries that you can run here probably won't do the job. Like we'd probably need to write a stored procedure first, and then query off that stored procedure. Because these are like aggregate fields, and RackForms probably isn't going to be the best to do that. But if you can't do, or I should say, in addition to stored procedures that kind of group some of this data, the way we actually do it is we go into our template. So when I press this button right here, RackForms generated a template for us. When we did that, it created this code that we see right here. Like RackForms went in, it grabbed a 3-column template, and it sort of filled in some of these fields. And really a template is just HTML and then these placeholders from our interesting items. In this case, this is a token that says this is an update field that looks at the name field, puts a text box in there, it's going to edit a string, it's going to make it 25 characters long, etc. So what we would do instead, perhaps, of this is we'd actually go in and we either manually modify the template like this. So we go in and we'd add additional columns, things like this. So, you know, we have these kind of this one long field across here, and then assignments, categories, etc. So you kind of have to work on that, or again, you could hire me as a consultant to build this layout. But then the one thing that I would want to point out that you'd be very interested in is when I want to show the value of a field, I use my token chooser and I bring up a bunch of tokens here. So you may recall I went in here before and looked at the source code and kind of pointed this out as a token. So this is how we actually create those tokens, is we put our cursor somewhere where we want to put one of those tokens. We hit the token chooser and we say, for example, we'll display the name in this field. And now when I run this, it should display the value of that field. So in this case, ID. I could actually change this and do other things. So like I could display name in there. So we have very simple tokens like that, but then we also have more complex tokens. So if I wanted to change the token, what I'd usually do is I'd actually take my cursor, I delete that token, and then I would use, for example, a function token. And what the function token actually does is when I click on the token, it says, here is the name of the function. So I'm going to say tally, and then this is the field it's going to pass to that function. So I actually write a PHP function called tally. And so what I'm going to do is that right now. So I'm going to say, here is a code block, and here is some PHP code that I'm going to write. And I'm going to create a function called tally that takes in an ID. And then the output of this is going to be an echo. So I'm just going to say, or it's actually to return. Let me see here. So ID plus 10. So let's just see what this does right here. Oops. Oh boy, what have I done? I think, yeah, this is definitely not right. Let me see what I did here. This is not a great demo. I apologize here. This should, honestly, this should work, but again, it's been such a long day that I could simply be doing something wrong right now. I apologize, but maybe before I get too bogged down, I'll actually look at this here. This is a development version of RackForms 2. Maybe I'm just doing something. Oh, actually, no, that's what it is. I'm thinking of C# and JavaScript right now. Sorry, this is PHP. Where's $signs in all of our variables? There we go. Okay, so there it is. So basically a function, my apologies for that delay. So a function basically goes in, and we say that for every turn of this record, we're going to pass it to a function called tally, and it's gonna put in that ID value. So this is just one that it's putting in there. Then we actually decide what that function is going to be. So I say function tally, I pass in the ID value, and then I'm saying return ID plus 10. And because the ID is 1 and I add 10 to it, that's why we get 11 right here. And so this then, I bring it up because maybe this could do some of these aggregate functions, right? Like maybe as you loop through, you do something like that. Again, the problem is that Builder is expecting to loop through many records, and this looks like aggregate data. In other words, this number of hours per week looks like something that you would need like either multiple SQL queries for, or again, you'd have to write a stored procedure that would do that ahead of time and just return that as a simple field. So yeah, could be tricky, but you know what, for now, again, you can just hire me on as a consultant to do this or similar. So I'll leave it at that for now. Questions, comments, as always, please let me know.